This is section 9 of module 3, and as you can discern in our title, we're going to jump into the subject of registration with the DDTC. This is a unique scenario that's only required through the DDTC, so it's essential that we point out its differences and requirements. So in our first bullet point, we're talking about registration being a unique requirement of the ITAR, in that any person in the business of manufacturing, exporting, or temporarily importing defense articles must register with the DDTC, formally register. As a trade tip, this registration rule applies to manufacturers of defense articles even if they do not export. So if a company has articles that fall under the USML, even if they don't export, they still have to register with the DDTC. It's that critical a function. It's that important to export controls. So this idea of registration, to reiterate, is unique to the DDTC. Well, why is that requirement even there? This registration requirement allows the U.S. government, USG, to gather information on persons involved in certain manufacturing and exporting activities. The government wants to know who's doing what. Should be noted in bullet point 2 that this registration process does not confer exporting privileges of defense articles or services. This is just a first step. As we note in our third bullet point, it is a precondition to applying for and receiving a license from the DDTC. So first you register, and if you're going to export, you have to apply for a license. So let's talk about this submission of a registration statement. Registrants must submit a statement of registration to the Office of Defense Trade Controls Compliance on what is called Form DS-2032. We have a small picture on the right-hand side. We're going to have a blown-up version of the entire document in just a few moments. Bullet point 2, this statement has to be signed by a U.S. person, senior officer in the organization, who is empowered to sign such documents. Registrant must also be able to prove that it is incorporated or otherwise authorized to do business in the United States. Must have a legal presence in the United States. And in our fourth bullet point, there is an annual fee for registration. That fee is going to vary. It's actually based on a tiered approach by DDTC. So as of the time of recording this class, and it could change moving forward, Tier 1 first-time registrant, $2,250. Tier 2, $2,750, and it goes up from there. But it's a fairly substantial amount, and companies need to be aware of the cost. As part of this registration process, a company has to also provide what's called a Statement of Registration Certification. Small version on the right, bigger version in just a moment. So the Statement of Registration must include a signed certification covering any of the following. For a sub-bullet point, if the company or its employees has ever been charged, indicted, or convicted for violation of certain export laws of the U.S. or other countries. Second sub-bullet point, if the company has been deemed ineligible to receive an export license or other approval from the U.S. government. And third sub-bullet point, whether the registrant is foreign-owned or foreign-controlled. So that's a Statement of Registration certification. And again, we'll see what it looks like in bigger form in just a few seconds. So here we are with an export perspective on this Statement of Registration, Form DS-2032. And it is a 5-page document. And in this particular instance, we're going to look at all 5. So the first thing they're looking at, upper left-hand side, number 1, is if the registrant is a U.S. person. That's a yes/no question. Also, the registrant type, you'll note a manufacturer, exporter, or broker. A broker having been defined during our definitions section. So understanding that is helping us already. Number 3, the registrant action or code. Is it a new registration? Is it a renewal? Government wants to know that. We said a moment ago that as of the time of this recording, a new registrant fee was $2,250, where a renewal, which really depends on the number of transactions throughout a year that a company has, but a renewal could be upwards of $2,750 and even more. That's why they're asking this question. So moving down, we see some basic information like the registrant's legal name and address. Number 5, annual registration fee amount. Depends on the tier, depends on the status of a company. Is it a new registration? Is it a renewal? What was the volume of licenses that were issued during the course of a year? All of those factors will influence the amount of the registration fee. Moving down the page, the registrant's organizational type. Is it a corporation, a company, LLC, partnership, etc., with some further information on dates of incorporation, place of incorporation, and such. Moving down, number 7, member of the board of directors, senior officers, partners, and owners. Moving from there onto the top of the next page with information on those individuals. Now, number 8, this is where the details start. U.S. munitions list defense articles or defense services involved in manufacturing, exporting, or brokering. There's that brokering definition that will come in handy again. And you have to select at least one. So it really depends on what category your articles fall under. We're going to talk about categories in great detail, so no need to worry about that just yet. But you can see how these categories are broken down, starting with 1, firearms, close assault weapons, and combat shotguns. 7, ground vehicles, military training equipment, military electronics, all the way down to category 21, which are articles, technical data, and defense services not otherwise enumerated in the previous 20 categories. So we're making a declaration in our registration about what categories our defense articles and or services fall under. Let's move on. Section 9 at the top of the page, names and addresses of registrants, owned or otherwise controlled U.S. subsidiaries and affiliates in the business of manufacturing, exporting, or brokering. Moving down to 10, name and addresses of registrants owned or otherwise controlled foreign subsidiaries and affiliates in the business of manufacturing, exporting, or brokering defense articles. So they want to know about foreign subsidiaries here. Full disclosure on names, addresses, etc. And in 11, name, address, and telephone number of all registrants, be they U.S. or foreign, intermediate parents through and including ultimate parent company. So corporate structures are very important to the DDTC also. Moving to the right on our screen, this is that statement of registration that we alluded to just a few moments ago. That's number 12. Under penalty according to federal law, I warrant the truth. Of course, this is the person signing the registration. But things like we already mentioned, never having been indicted or otherwise charged for or convicted of violating any of the U.S. criminal statutes enumerated in 22 CFR 120.27. Moving down, contract and license eligibility, eligible to contract with or to receive a license or other approval, or is ineligible to contract with or to receive a license or other approval. Details moving down further on foreign ownership. Brokering activity has its own specific section. I have brokering activity to report, yes or no. And then at the bottom, additional supporting documentation, organizational charts, foreign-owned, nonprofit information, any variety of things. So some pretty substantial detail that the government is looking for, starting out with this statement of registration and the overall registration application. This is the last page in that statement of registration, asking for a third-party point of contact, as well as, bottom of the section here, senior officer details and signature. So this is all about the registration process. This isn't about applying for licenses. You have to be registered before you can even apply for a license. So this is the first step, and it does have a fee associated with it. Let's move on. Well, we have a real-world scenario here that helps us to illustrate, in a real-world sense, the requirements for using the DS4076 CJ form. And the question really revolves around, does an organization have to be registered in order to ask for commodity jurisdiction? Let's see what happens here. A U.S. manufacturer of commercial aircraft parts wants to get into producing for military applications. The company understands that if an article or service falls under the USML, that it must register with the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls. We have that clear. However, the firm has a doubt as to whether or not the products it will produce are covered by the USML and wishes to get a commodity jurisdiction ruling. In order to file a DS4076, does the exporter first have to be registered with the DDTC using form DS2032, which is what we just looked at? Lots of numbers and alphabet soup here, so we have to keep things clear. The commodity jurisdiction form is 4076. That registration form is 2032. The question is, does the exporter first have to be registered with the DDTC in order to even ask for commodity jurisdiction? Let's think about this for a moment and we'll pop up the answer. Well, let's see what we have here. Pursuant to Part 120.4b of the ITAR, registration with the DDTC is not required prior to a submission of a CJ request. That makes sense, actually. You have to know if you fall under the ITAR before you have to register. If it is determined that the commodity is a defense article or service covered by the USML, registration is then required. Let's see where that's found specifically in the ITAR. So this is a reference from ITAR Part 120.4b. Gives us another look at how the ITAR is structured. Commodity jurisdiction. Registration with the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls as defined in Part 122 of this subchapter is not required prior to submission of a commodity jurisdiction request. So you can go out for a CJ, a commodity jurisdiction request, without being registered with the DDTC. So that real-world scenario should clarify that point pretty well. We're going to wrap up here with Section 9, and when we come back in Section 10, we'll be looking at that U.S. munitions list in some detail. So continue to study, stay tuned, and we'll be back with Section 10 momentarily.